So this is Auto Collabs, and I don't know how we're going to start the show.
There was this one idea one day that we were just going to call Cirillo out of the blue and start the show, and we tried that, and it went to voicemail, and so instead we invited him to Philly.
Yeah.
What was my voicemail like? I haven't said it yet.
Oh no, it was that. It was like it was like the voicemail when you go to Walmart and get a new phone every week kind of thing.
Yeah, it was really bad. But either way, all of us came together here. We're all in Philadelphia right now to kick off a podcast that was really born in all of our minds kind of at separate times. And it had been baking back in there. And then eventually, little by little, we started talking about it and verbalizing it. And we knew the ASOTU ecosystem needed a deeper conversation format because, you know, the morning show is news and it's insights and it's high energy and it's super fast. And we wanted to leave a little time to breathe. And, you know, so we called Michael and said, hey, what are you doing?
I said, nothing, splidoosh. Give me a second. Well, it's funny, too. We've experienced this over the last 2 years at least 18 months where one of us is doing something and then we realize that the other one is also kind of doing something very similar. And you were the first one. You were telling us earlier, I mean, around the Clubhouse thing.
Yeah.
Like, you were like, hey, dude, like, we need to talk. You and I are in each other's brains. Like, we're thinking a lot of the same thoughts. And then, I mean, this happened recently with the three of us. You're on your famed behind-the-scenes Google Meet lunch meetings where you were like, hey, so we have this idea about a podcast. And I'm like, funny, because I wanted to talk to you about this idea. And so here we are.
There it came. Yeah. No, and I think that's what it's the momentum that the three of us are feeling a lot. And I think there's a lot of people, even in the automotive industry as a whole, that are feeling that type of momentum. And, you know, Paul and I, we've talked about it a lot where, you know, that everybody is feeling that there's this kind of move towards something. It's maybe not been named yet, but there's words like collaboration and innovation and new customer experience and better employee experience and all of these things that are just kind of like, you know, everyone's starting to say, oh, you're doing that and you're saying thinking the same thing and saying the same thing. And it's not that stuff hasn't been happening over the past 10, 15, even 20 years. We actually, it was interesting. We were watching and David Kane just said, hey, look, this is a story that I've been talking about for a long time, but I think that kind of everyone's finding their way to each other, you know?
Yeah, 100%. You know what I love about David Kane? Can I just pause you there?
Yeah.
Go, please.
Even when he insults you, you feel edified.
You're like, thank you.
So I was at his event in Kentucky. He does it every year. One of the most phenomenal things I've ever been to. Very loving, very, very David, right? Like you just feel nourished. Yeah, like I am a planet circling this bright star, you know, like that's how you feel. And so he booked a thing at the Lexington racetrack there and it said in the pamphlet, you know, make sure you're wearing appropriate clothing, a blazer, some khakis. We're going up to the club. I mean, right? So on the way
listening, we're all wearing black flat bills and black shirts. It's like we don't do.
I've literally been kicked out of places over this.
Okay, so on the way in, I buy one of those Newsies caps. I got my blazer.
Yeah, okay, I can see
walk in. David greets us. He says, oh, it's so good to see you guys. And I was like, thank you. Impression, yeah. And then I said, man, I feel like such a poser. He goes, haha, you are.
And you're like, I think he meant that.
Yes. And I was like, why do I want to hug you after this? But
Thank
I do.
you.
But you're right. We're all moving in a direction. And I actually had a funny conversation with a colleague of mine the other day, not in the auto industry. He's a PR guy, very young, very into tech, very, like, he just understands that space. But he was talking about how he has to work with somebody that's really old. They've retired. They're still pen to paper kind of people. And I'm like, isn't this interesting? We've been experiencing this divide for quite some time. And now that old generation who was very accustomed to doing things a certain way have made their exit or are making their exit very rapidly. And now, even though there's another generation coming up that's used to doing things the new way, I think we're all still very much trying to find our footing and make sense of how we can make it even more efficient. And I think that's part of that draw that you're feeling. We're all like, oh, we know there's something, we could be doing it better.
There's a velocity to it. What the pandemic did was kind of sped up quite a bit, and we've talked about this quite a lot. And so I think that was already happening, but it was like molasses speed, right? And the people were finding each other, and they're starting to kind of get together and talk about things. I even think like NADA was starting to adopt new thinking, but they still had a lot of resistance from the old guard. And the pandemic hit, I feel like all bets were off. And now, like the new entrants like Tesla and Carvana really ramped up during that time period. And I feel like now there's just an increased intensity of rallying around like what we've been calling, Kyle and I have been calling a beacon, right? What we're trying to do with ASOTU is put a beacon up so people can see it from far away and then just gather toward it. And we know that if the right dealers and the right industry partners get in the same vicinity, we know innovation is going to move faster, which is one of the reasons we're doing this show, is because we're committed to helping remove the friction between dealers and industry partners so that innovation can move faster. Because every time somebody doesn't understand what a vendor actually does, like what their product or service actually is, friction slows us down because you don't know if that's the right fit or not the right fit because you just don't understand what it is. So we're trying to eliminate a lot of that. And also, man, how many solutions have we seen in the last 12 months where vendors have worked together to create a new solution for a dealer?
Yeah.
It actually, I think I was talking to someone a couple months ago how in like 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, right? That kind of 5-year time period, we saw a lot of desire, and even like in the event circuit and all that type of stuff, the conversation was all around who's going to build the one thing to do it all, right? And we all know the company that came along, Techion, was like, we're going to do it, right? And we love the team at Techion, but I think that there's been a shift over the last couple of years recognizing that both like dealers have many different needs. Like there's not going to be one kind of throat to choke on figuring out who's going to nail it for all dealers from a technology perspective. And then there are different technology partners that own a section of the technology landscape that's really beneficial to actually create these integrations and flows between things, right? Everyone in auto kind of looks towards Salesforce, right? From a tech, and they're like, yo, if everyone just did it like Salesforce. And what's really interesting about Salesforce is if you buy Salesforce off the shelf, it is not a great product.
It's custom development.
It's custom development and plugging in different apps and things that move seamlessly within it. So just thinking about that from a CRM perspective and this transition from we need one platform to do it all to we need MarTech vendors and we need system tech vendors and we need operations tech and we need all of them to talk to each other and move in and out. And that's really what I think in the end, like if you could really dive in with dealers, that's what is being asked in this new effort toward collaboration.
Right, which is not a new concept, right? You look at companies like Slack, Dropbox, any SaaS company, right? You see this example where Slack said, hey, we're not going to be the best at everything. One-to-one communication, team communication, that is our thing. We are going to double, triple, quadruple down on that, but then we're going to say yes to everything that wants to integrate in with this, whether or Discord or Dropbox, and that's the level I think that we need to anticipate. But it makes me think about a couple of years ago the buzz was disruption, right? Everybody was talking about disruption. And I'm convinced. Oh dear, this might go on the other podcast. Oh boy, I'm convinced that those that were most vocal about the concept of disruption had not even read a single sentence of a single paragraph of the thesis of what disruptive innovation actually is, as it was authored by Michael Christensen, the Harvard, because it wasn't about interruption, which is what everybody positioned it as. Oh, this is interrupting my way of doing business. No, that's not disruptive innovation. Disruptive innovation is seeing, to your point, a little segment of the market that is going unserviced, not very efficiently, and going for it. An example of that is, and in a way that the incumbent companies, the bigger companies, can't do.
Yeah.
Right? So you look at like Samsung has to sell a $1,200 smartphone. That is their market. They know they can do it. That's where they want to sit. In comes opportunity, a new market segment like the $4 smartphone company in India. What did they do? They identified a segment of the market and a need at the bottom level of that market that could use that. Next thing you know, they're a multi-gajillion dollar company.
Is that a Canadian factor?
Yeah. That's the Queen's English. But you must say it with... anyways,
little French with the English and the whole 9 yards, right?
And that to me is, we didn't even understand what disruptive innovation is, and there's so much room for it. The incumbents ought not be afraid by not having to offer it all. They should double, triple, quadruple down on the thing they're so good at.
Yes.
And screw everything else. And there will be market entrants that come in and say, to your point, Kyle, that's the thing we're going to focus on. That's the problem we're going to solve. It's down here, but there's boatloads of opportunity.
Well, and I think that a lot of the effort is recognizing the need for both, right? Like knowing that the data sets or the way that these companies that have done it for so long they have to continue doing that way because of tech or because of processes or people or whatever that is, that maybe we can't just like throw that out, that it actually has to allow for these new entrants to connect and collaborate with, and that's going to actually serve, because I mean, you think about it, we literally just were talking to a dealer that re-signed their Reynolds contract.
Oh man.
Okay.
This is painful.
But think about that. That's a massive decision that they have to make, because the things that stop if
everything
you don't have a DMS,
yes,
like absolutely wreck your business. So that's a 5-year commitment now that they're in.
Right.
The volume of tech companies alone that will deal with data, especially with all of the new regulations over the next 5 years, the volume that will both be started and grown it's obscene, honestly.
Right.
And so when you look at that, like Reynolds has no choice at this point to at least figure out how to allow those to serve the dealer, right?
Did you see, I'm sure you saw this a couple of weeks ago, Microsoft announces they are no longer supporting Internet Explorer.
Yeah.
I read that headline.
I did not see that.
Yeah.
Yep. So
I read that headline, and the first thought that went through my mind was, what is the vibe at like Reynolds and CDK today? Forcing all these dealers.
Yeah.
It's happened, guys. They're just, everybody's walking out with the
We
box.
prepared for this. We prepared for this. I think there is an unreal amount of this type of conversation that is pent up within the minds and the hearts of vendors and dealers across the country. We have the privilege, all of us do actually, and I think it'd be good to give people a little bit of a background on each of us. We've been in so many stores. We've seen the back end of so many dealership systems. Can
I before we get to that story, because I don't want to forget a piece of the puzzle that a lot of times we don't, because I want to talk about our stories, but a lot of times that when we start to talk about this, we kind of remove and set off on a shelf somewhere, hoping that it doesn't disturb everything. Right. But it's the reason why we're in business, and it's 3 letters. It's OEM, or original equipment manufacturer, the people that actually provide the cars.
Right.
And I think that a lot of times we segment, okay, here's the dealership operations, and this is the tech. These are the partners that I need, whether it be, consultative or technology or any of those partners. And then over here's the OEM, and they're messing with some of this, but I don't want them to mess with it. And then they've got requirements from a customer experience perspective, and we've got requirements from a customer experience perspective from a dealer side. Mm-hmm. And I think there's also needs to be a renewed energy toward that level of collaboration, especially with things like EV and agency model and all of those thoughts, which I know that this we'll dive into that a lot, right?
Conversations coming on that for sure.
But we cannot forget that that's 3 tiers of this conversation. But I think that the one that we really, really have not done a good job at is asking the consumer the right questions. And for me, the right way to collaborate and to innovate is to actually draw all of that together to the table, right? Yes, we need industry partners and dealers to be on the same page and collaborate and be partners and not just like, oh, check the box and 30 days later it doesn't work type thing. But we need all of these conversations to kind of come to like, because everyone needs each other to survive is what the reality is.
Yeah, it really is. The interdependency of the ecosystem is the truth, right? That is the one thing that is the truth, whether who's pointing fingers or who's controlling what. The bottom line is everybody needs each other or it doesn't work, right? And if we don't do what you just suggested, right, bring the consumer voice to the front. One of the ways we've been talking about this a lot is like what we're trying to solve together is the consumer experience. And when you say that, that's actually the OEM, the dealers, the tech partners, right? If they can work together, solve the consumer experience, then it doesn't matter who the new entrant is.
Exactly.
But there's such a weak or a fragmented consumer experience. There's all types. Like when you talk about disruption as being like, hey, let's focus on a market segment and go in, right? You look at what Carvana did, what Tesla did and is doing, right? What they both are. Mm-hmm. And that's actually more accurate, I think, to what they're doing, what you described, than kind of the way the industry has been absorbing it. They're trying to come in and take it all.
Right.
Right. I saw Ernie Garcia speak at the Automotive News Retail Forum, and probably 3 years ago now. And I was like, is he going to get lynched? Right? Like he walks into this room with like 700 dealers. And I was just like, popcorn time. But he was like, look, he's like, this market is so big. We're shooting for this small, tiny percentage of it.
Right.
And he said, and what we're trying to do is serve customers in this way because we think the data shows us this is what they want. Right. And that's what he said.
Yeah.
He didn't say the other things. And so like bringing all that together.
Yeah.
I love that you bring it around to customer. I have this visual I love to, there's an actual cartoon of it somewhere, but it's a tiny little yellow fish being eaten, about to be eaten by a slightly larger orange fish, being, a red fish, so on and so forth. Yeah. And then the biggest of the blue fish says, oh man, I don't really like yellow fish, right? The very first fish, because he's going to consume them all. And I use that visual to suggest, hey, you're so worried about Carvana, or you're so worried about whatever one of these companies you love to hate, you love to make them the villain. But to your point, he's focused on this little sliver over here, which is he's realized, or they've realized, that the biggest fish is not the company that's bigger than you, the company that you think is interrupting your business model. The biggest fish has always and will always be the consumer. And if you can identify them and solve their problem, they're the ones that are going to eat you for lunch. Don't get mad at Carvana because they identified something, or don't get mad. They're, and so I think of it in those terms. And the beauty of it is if dealers, vendors, everyone alike, to your point of everyone needs to kind of come together. And I love how you say like, hey, this is going to be an uncomfortable conversation, but it's one that must happen, right? We need to all agree on the fact that it's the customer that is the biggest fish. That there will always be the biggest fish. They dictate the direction. And second to that is that we already, every one of us, already have every resource we need at our disposal right now to provide the customer with the experience that they want. Like Uber wasn't like, if only when Jesus descends from the clouds, then we will have what we need. No, they were like, okay, we didn't invent the internet, but we're going to use that. We didn't invent smartphones, we're going to use those. All these things already exist. Ride sharing, the concept of it already exists. Taxis already exist. People who own cars already exist.
Review platforms already exist. All of this.
They took all of those existing resources and assembled them in a way that was fresh, new, and made sense to the customer. And we all can do that. We have internet, we have websites, we have inventory, some of us have, time to record, but you know what I mean? Like,
if you're listening to this in 5 years, there was a time when no one had inventory.
Once upon a time,
there were nil inventory for sale. And so that's the big thing for me. It is, yes, let's all rally around the same beacon, but let's have the meaningful conversation. And that's what we're trying to accomplish here.
Yeah, for sure. Let's do this. This is about the end of episode 00. We have a lot of interviews. with a lot of people and a lot of things to talk about. Why don't we just go around and introduce the people to your background, where you came from, so I know we have some new listeners and want to make sure everybody's on the same page. Michael, why don't you go first?
Well, gosh, I mean, I've been in the automotive industry now this is my 22nd year. I started when I was 17. And so, yes. Yeah, do the math. I'm 29, guys, okay? Once I turned 29, I stayed 29. Oh, wait, I was going
to say it's a rough 29 years, huh?
And so, and I've always been into the marketing side of things. Inventory management has been something that I've always been passionate about, and I know that's super unsexy, but it is the nucleus of what drives the variable side of the business. So that's really where I got my start, helping dealers with the inventory side of things. And then that evolved into an agency and things of that nature. But, I needed a creative outlet because I love this kind of stuff. And I have a past life in the music business and had a little stint there in sound engineering. I know we kind of all share that in common. And so to kind of break up the monotony of the day 9.5 years ago, I was like, I'm going to start a podcast. This was back when you still had to upload it to your own web host.
Oh, wow.
iTunes hadn't figured anything out.
No.
I had to host everything. I had to create my own RSS feed. I had to do all that kind of stuff. Started this little podcast called The Dealer Playbook. Here we are 9.5 going on 10 years later.
A couple people listen to it.
A couple of people listen to it in 70 countries, but that's besides the point. But what's always inspired me, what's always encouraged me to continue to do that, because both of you know, people go, "Oh, it's 2022, man. Creating content's the deal."
Yeah,
it is hard.
Yeah,
it's work.
It's wake up. I don't want to do that interview today. Not for the person, just maybe I don't want to do the whole setup. If people can see the hyperlapse, we'll post it somewhere of how long it took to just set up this room.
Right.
It's going through that while you're trying to grow a business. But what's been encouraging is exactly that. It's like, hey, there are industry professionals, both on the dealer side and the vendor side, who are listening to this, who are engaging with it, who are sending feedback and comments and saying, "Man, you changed the trajectory of my career." And I know you guys get comments. I've witnessed it firsthand at NADA, and that's so encouraging. Zero desire to be famous. This whole somebody said auto celebrity to me, and I think I puked in the nearest garbage pail. It's flattering, but also...
But you're never going to be on Dancing with the Stars.
I can do the Carlton, but I'm never going to do it on TV. And I mean, at the end of the day, look, I put my socks on one at a time like everyone else. I wake up, I ring a bell, the butler comes into my room, opens the curtains.
Same way.
puts one sock at a time. So that's my story. We do that to current, but, just super excited to be connected with the two of you and doing something fresh like this.
Tell us about your family really quick.
My family's awesome.
Yeah,
I have a wife. My beautiful wife, Kara, who I'm convinced is blind because, and 3 kids. My son Dallin's 13, Tristan is 11, and my daughter Aria is 9.
And what part of the country are you in?
We're in Texas.
by way of
Canada. Our queen who resides in London.
Everyone goes Canada to Texas. That's the normal flow.
It's only 108 degrees today.
But enough about me. Talk about yourself. What do you think about me?
Hold on, let me hit the pause button. That's fantastic. Kyle, let's jump to you. We got about 3 minutes left, and then we're going to let these fine people listening and watching go on their way and go to the first episode.
Yeah, so let's see. I've been in auto since the very last week of Cash for Clunkers in 2009.
That was your first week?
It was my very first week.
I never had that contextualized for me.
It was very, very interesting because I think the second thing I did on my job, the first thing was watch a Jim Ziegler video about why to take the rebate and not take the rate. And then right after that, the used car manager comes up and says to me, "Kyle, we need to take some cars to get the blocks freezed." And I then, "The blocks freezed? What is that?"
Bill Cosby?
What's that?
Was Bill Cosby?
It wasn't Bill Cosby,
Anyway.
but so back then you took it and they had to freeze the engines. They poured the whatever liquid that seized them up and everything. So I was taking those and like running all day to
What
that.
a weird time.
Yeah. So that was my first week in the business. So yeah, that's why I'm still here today. No, I'm just
I'm waiting for the comeback. Do that again.
Yes. So so I've been all across dealership operations. Started in sales, moved all the way through, and was on the dealer side for 12 years. Started doing some creation, have a little podcast called Contagious Conversations, which has been on a brief hiatus. And Michael reminded me the other day that I've left my audience in the dust. But
Heartless.
Heartless. But so done that, have really sunk my teeth into the marketing arena. And then recently, Paul, you and I with Automotive State of the Union also have a little bit of a tech company called Auto Genius, building out a really cool community and some neat tech on in some of this collaborative effort that we're talking about. So I have a family, a wife of 12 years, a 8-year-old daughter, 6-year-old son, and 4-month-old baby.
Little baby. Wee little baby. My name's Paul Daly. Not that any event you asked. Throw a J in there just for fun, because the domain name didn't. Paul Daly was some designer in England, which he seemed like he did a really good job, dressed like Bono. But
that's good. That's good.
The shoe fits. Been in the industry for almost 20 years now. Got my first job at a dealership, the first one I ever walked in when I was in my mid-20s, to be a service writer. Started a reconditioning company, built that. Was acquired by Net Wizard International. In the middle of that, started creating content, mainly for our team, our company culture. Before YouTube, you could stream anything to YouTube. You could not, because it wasn't there. So we drove around with video cameras and played them at our company parties. Started an agency, ended up being a mostly automotive, fully integrated marketing agency called Congruent, and then started this little thing called Automotive State of the Union when the pandemic hit and no one knew what the heck to do. But we did it together on a live stream on LinkedIn. Thousands of people showed up, and we just kept going. Kyle, you and I met, decided to pour a little fuel on the fire, made it official company, and now we spend most of our time just trying to rally dealers, industry partners, and most recently, OEMs. And we're always talking to the consumers every time we're in an Uber or anything like that. So we're hoping through this podcast we can gather together, bring more of this energy to you, bring more of these conversations, hopefully unpack some of the angles that haven't been unpacked yet, and get under the surface of the usual things that people say when they're on podcasts. We're going to ask the tough questions. You're going to hear interviews from each of us, sometimes multiple, a few of us interviewing the same person, and we're going to give you a little thought and commentary after we think about it for a little bit, and we're going to give you a little comeback. So it'll be an intro, do an interview. We'll give you our thoughts after we digest it a little bit. So thanks for tuning in. We hope you have an amazing time with us on the Auto Collabs podcast, and we'll talk to you soon with episode 1.
Welcome to Auto Collabs. Why are we recording?
Are we rolling yet?